Welcome back to Evolve. Today we have the honor of speaking with Andrew, an English teacher who I actually worked with for many years in London. And today we will be discussing the topic of drinking culture in the UK and being sober. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hakim. Very pleased to be here.
So you have been, correct me if I'm wrong, 8 years sober?
You're wrong. Nearly 8 years. 8 years in May the 15th to be precise. So looking forward to that particular anniversary. Yeah, nearly 8 years.
And do you define yourself as a teetotal, sober? What's the kind of language around it that you use?
Maybe mentally I do, but I don't actually say those words out loud. I just say I stopped drinking and I hope that's forever. But I don't use those words like teetotal. I think they're a little bit loaded and people have sort of preconceptions about that. So just say I stopped drinking.
And obviously, with whatever you're comfortable sharing, could you tell us why, what that means to you and why you made that decision?
The reasons are kind of manifold. You know, I think everybody knows that quitting alcohol will be better for your health. Probably save you a bit of money if you're a regular drinker. And everybody has an experience, or most people must have an experience of alcohol changing your behavior, changing your personality, not always for the better. And I've had all of those experiences. In the past, I've quit alcohol because I wanted to improve my running times. And I've quit alcohol because I don't like the effects that it has on my behavior, personality. And I don't like hangovers. Obviously, nobody likes hangovers. But to live the rest of your life without a hangover, there's a lot to be said for that.
After nearly 8 years, not 8 years yet, what would you say are the main differences that you feel, if any, in terms of within yourself, health, but also mentally as well?
Yeah, I could say health, you kind of have markers. You know, if you're doing any kind of sport, my sport up until recently has been running, and you can see your running times improve when you're not drinking regularly. Going back to the hangover thing, you know, being sober means that you're not going to lose days of your life, you know, to what is frankly poisoning yourself. That is not always something you feel like, oh yeah, I'm not hungover. You don't kind of consciously feel that. But if you stop and think about it, you've got more life, more experience, more time to enjoy your time, relationships with other people, if you're not having these days that are kind of written off by a heavy night before. So yeah, I think that's the main difference, just feeling generally within myself more healthy. And a good deal of satisfaction is something I wanted to do for a long time. There's the joke, I think, attributed to W.C. Fields, quitting smoking is easy. I've done it hundreds of times. And that's how I was with alcohol. Literally on Facebook life events, I could see at the end of each year, Andrew, quit smoking, quit smoking, quit smoking. Quit alcohol. Sorry, not smoking. I've never smoked. Quit alcohol, quit alcohol. You know, quit alcohol about 10 times a year for about 5 years.
Wow.
So I've got a lot of satisfaction to say, I think I've done it now. Before I did it nearly 8 years, my longest time was 3 months. So I can say, you know, I'm pleased about what I've achieved.
Based on what you just said, it is very common, not just with alcohol, but things people want to quit, that they do go back and forth.
Yeah.
Firstly, why do you think that is? And secondly, how were you able then to? There might be other people who would like to follow in your footsteps. How were you able to stop the pinball of back and forth and actually achieve the goal?
Yeah, I think if anybody out there does want to quit alcohol, one, I'm not an expert on it. I think, you know, if you've got a real problem, then seek professional help. But if, you know, anecdotes help you, my experience is I wanted to do it for a long time. I think that's important. You've got to want to do it. You can't just have other people telling you got to do it. You've got to, within yourself, want to do it. And I know it's not easy. And I think when people want to quit something and they find it hard and they go back to whatever it is they're trying to quit, it's very easy to get into this kind of catastrophe thinking that, oh my God, you know, I've gone back, it's ruined, you know, I might as well just drink alcohol nonstop because I failed. So yeah, you're probably going to fail a few times before you manage to do it. That's certainly my experience. But my big catalyst was one particularly heavy night where the next day I really felt poisoned, the mother of all hangovers. And given that quitting was something I wanted to do anyway, that was a big push to say never again. I'd said never again before, but this time it seems to have worked out.
Sometimes they say, you have to really hit rock bottom before you make a change, which I don't think is always the case, but
No.
I can relate in that the hangovers just got worse and worse. And I would feel depressed for no other reason. Like things were going well in my life, but it was a self-inflicted mini depression of just feeling completely like, I'd almost feel like I needed to cry, even though nothing was sad. Days would be wasted. I wouldn't be productive. I wouldn't want to go to the gym. I've said on another podcast, I'd want to always order McDonald's burgers to myself on my own. I would order the delivery, just sit. In terms of the English culture or British culture, obviously it's so embedded within our culture here. Was that something that also contributed to making it difficult? Like how were you received within England, where we were on the tube in the morning and we could see people at 11 a.m. Drinking beers. So it's such a big thing here. How did that tie into everything?
Yeah, alcohol is, as you know, it's a really big part of British culture, probably a lot of cultures around the world. But Brits tend to have a really immature approach to alcohol. If you contrast that with continental Europe, where they've got this weird thing where they can just drink a glass of wine and then put the wine bottle back in the cupboard rather than go on a binge. I don't think I'd ever class myself as being alcoholic. And I know some people, do have that experience and it's terrible. But if it was available, I couldn't stop until it was way, way too late. And it's a big part of the culture. It's a big part of work culture. I found whatever job you do, it's a big part of that culture. We're in insurance, we drink a lot. We're in banking, we drink a lot. I'm a nurse, we drink a lot. It seems to be like every job seems to pride themselves on being able to drink a lot of alcohol. And I think about it as somebody telling the same joke over and over and over again. On a Monday, you'd say, "How's your weekend?" They say, "Oh, I got so hammered." And the only polite response is to say, "Ha ha ha, ha, what a lad." Yeah, you can't say, "My God, that's terrible. You should be ashamed of yourself." That's not a valid approach. So it's in the culture that drinking alcohol is funny, it's clever, and it never stops being funny, even though you're just telling the same joke again and again and again. I think it's changing a lot, isn't it, Hakeem? That being sober is kind of a thing that people do aspire to much more than they used to now. I think a lot of the drink culture, the pub culture is changing. There are good alternatives available. But certainly my experience is there's a pressure to drink. And when you say that you want to quit, there's a pressure not to quit. Thinking about it, I think alcohol may be unique in this sense. It's a drug, but other drugs, if I said to you, "Hakeem, I'm a heroin user and I want to quit," and you said, "Well, just have a little bit of heroin." Nobody would say that, right? They'd just say, "Good on you quitting." But even smoking, they wouldn't say, "Oh, don't quit, have a few cigarettes." They just say, "Good on you quitting." But alcohol is unique. People don't want you to stop generally. So there's big pressure.
Before I pass to Clem, just the word you mentioned, lad. I went to a boys' school and, growing up with those guys, incredible guys who I'm still friends with, but we've also in our own circle gone through the journey where you enter uni and then you're not a lad and you're not a man in the eyes of the culture if you don't not just drink, but really get drunk, compete with others in how much you can drink, despite knowing the long list. I'm not a scientist, but we know that cancer is linked to alcohol consumption. Depression, anxiety, of course, are people fighting. So many different things are linked to alcohol, but it's still celebrated and encouraged. I think, that is quite unique. I can't imagine ever pressuring my friends to smoke more cigarettes. But then you are, at the amount of times we've probably all of us in our lives been pressured to just one more, go on, mate, go on, be a man. And now at 30 years old, that wouldn't get to me as much. But when you're 18 or 19, you're finding yourself in the world and someone a little bit older than you makes you feel like you're not part of the culture. that can really play on your mind. But I'm wondering, Clem, then, obviously we mentioned continental Europe. We've got continental Europe sitting on over there. So how was it for you as an observer coming into the British culture and seeing our way of drinking compared to in France and Spain?
I mean, there are a lot of people in France and Spain who also drink a lot, not in moderation, especially when I was younger, going out on the weekend in France, you'd see a lot of people drunk. And the same conversation as you mentioned, Andrew. The next day we texting each other. Oh man, I've had such a bad hangover, and we're all laughing. And what did you do yesterday? Do you remember? And all of these things. So I think there are still a lot of similarities. The main factor that was a bit different to me when I came to London was going to a pub and wanting to try a nice whiskey. And some people would say, "But why do you care? Why do you care if it's nice or not? Just drink or whatever." So maybe the appreciation can be different, maybe in France or in Spain. But then again, you see also a lot of people. I mean, in Spain, in France, there are a lot of issues that come from alcohol. A lot of people who have problem with alcohol. It's just because it's also a big part of the culture. Since I stopped drinking, I always wonder why and how did it become part of the culture. To a point where, as you mentioned, if you don't drink, people, they kind of sometimes make you feel like you're out of the group.
Part of a lot of cultures, isn't it? And we've all got experience of Korean culture, and in Korean culture, it's the kind of another level, isn't it? That it's kind of just taken for granted that you're going to drink a lot.
Yeah,
and if you don't drink, in this country, your friends are kind of try and persuade you, but in Korea, it's like you've ruined everybody's evening if you're not joining them and drinking and literally making them feel awkward.
In some social context, one of the first questions, going out to a bar or a restaurant, one of the first questions they would ask me was, "How many bottles of soju can you drink?"
Obviously, I grew up around that kind of lad rugby culture, and it would be, he had 15 pints the other night. And that is, whoa, so it was a competitive thing, but I think Koreans take it to another level.
You'd hear that, but you wouldn't hear before drinking, it would be more like talking about what happened yesterday, right? but you wouldn't hear at the start of the evening, so how many bottles of soju or how many beers can you drink?
And Korea's got this expression we don't have in English. So it's always funny when Koreans translate it into our language. They say, "You're really good at drinking." We might say something in English like, "You can hold your drink," but they actually say, "You're good at drinking," like some kind of achievement.
Yeah, are you good at drinking? Yeah. Since we mentioned different culture and the drinking habits around the cultures, my feeling was that in Korea, people, they just see it as a way to relieve stress.
Yeah.
In Korea, when I was going out, people would always try to drink as much as possible.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, it's not, from my perspective, it's not always like this. We would go out and see people drinking a lot, but not necessarily on purpose, trying to go as far as possible. Whereas in Korea, I felt like it was more like this. Okay, let's just all drink until, we just really can't anymore. And I was thinking that maybe that's because they think that it's going to help them to get that stress out, that they just, drink as much as they can to get all of that stress out of the system in a way, which is a bit sad.
It hit me going to Clemente's hometown of Galicia because everyone let's say on the weekend or just at an evening, you would see wine bottles, beers on every table. But what hit me as a Brit is that I didn't see one rowdy person. No one was what I could view as drunk. People were a lot more relaxed. And it was in that moment that I really was quite self-critical of our culture here, because growing up, drinking was synonymous with, fighting and I guess being very I don't know if aggressive is the word, but quite macho and wanting to, there was a lot of confrontation. Football, drinking, shouting, being loud. I thought that was what drinking was. But I realized it is different. in each culture. But I guess the points you've mentioned about feeling left out of the group, what advice would you give to someone who, for their own reasons, they want to quit, but then they're nervous about how will people around me receive me? You know, I don't want to be that person left out.
It's interesting. I think, first of all, I'd say I understand it's very hard. Culture is strong. Feeling part of the group, that's a natural tendency we all have. However non-conformist you might think you are, the pressure to conform is strong. So it does require quite a lot of determination and strength if you're going to follow through on what you want to do. I would say one piece of advice is a lot of this is to do with the environment that you're in. And sometimes you don't have some choice in that, like social things, all your friends are going to the pub, you might rather not go to the pub, but you're in a minority. But as much as possible, if you can control the environment, if you've got some say in it, let's go to a cafe, let's go out for a meal, And then if you're maybe going for a curry, some people might drink beer, but there isn't that kind of attitude to the alcohol. It becomes an accompaniment to the meal, and you can have a non-alcoholic beer, you can have water, whatever it is, with that meal. So if you've got the chance to control the culture, do that, because it's always going to be harder not to drink if you're in a pub than if you're in a restaurant or a cafe or just around a friend's house. Let's not go to a pub, let's stay and watch a film together. Then hopefully you haven't got the same pressure. So I could just turn down invitations to the pub, or say, one thing I used to do as well is if I was invited to the pub, I'd join you later. And I remember once after when I was working in a company, I actually literally went to the cinema, watched a film, came back and joined everyone, like seeing all my colleagues, most of them sort of half cut, and could still enjoy part of the evening without spending hours and hours in the pub.
Yeah.
But good luck if that's you. Good luck, because it's difficult.
I mean, it was actually, interestingly, Andrew that introduced me to non-alcoholic beers when we used to work and take students on the activity cruise. And one of them was the Duke.
That's right.
The pub right next to, where I grew up in England. Pubs for me were quite scary places because I would associate them with just people being rowdy. So coming to London and realizing, wow, there are pubs where, people can be civilized and, just have like nice conversations. That was quite eye-opening for me at the time, because I realized, I can actually sit down, have a non-alcoholic drink in a so-called pub and not have to associate all that other baggage and rowdiness. So I think building that habit for me of just being confident to go to a pub or a bar and know that I can look at the mocktail menu, or I can get a soda water, or I can get whatever, that was quite reassuring to me. And you might get a bit of stick from people, which fair enough. Banter is a huge part of our culture as well. Yeah. So you should be able to eventually, take it on the chin and say, look, fair enough, I'm not drinking. But you mentioned earlier, right? If you're firm enough, it almost turns into a respect. Could you comment on that? You said that you almost got a sort of respect when you're firm in your principles after telling people.
Did I say that?
Yeah.
Have I ever experienced respect?
Doing my best.
Well, yeah, whatever you want to do, if some things in life are worth achieving and they're not easy to do. So you do sometimes have to dig your heels in and say, whatever the pressure you get. And as you said, banter is a lot of it. A lot of the time your mates probably don't mean it, but they want to kid you and chide you. But yeah, whatever it is, sometimes you do have to dig your heels in and say, no, that's it. Okay, you've said your piece, but no, I'm not going to drink. Okay, you think this is silly drinking alcohol-free beer, too bad, that's what I'm doing. But I do understand that pressure. And looking back, that pressure, it stopped me quitting many times. I can remember once, apologies to my brother Paul for mentioning him, but I remember once I quit for a few weeks, and it was Christmas, and I was staying with my brother Paul and his family, And we got there early and having a cup of tea and whatnot. And he came in, my brother Paul came in from work, and he just literally got the wine bottle and poured out the wine. And I didn't have the strength to say, you know what, Paul, I'm not drinking. It's just like, yeah, that looks good. I'm drinking. And I remember an Italian friend, were invited. It was one of the many times that I quit for probably a couple of weeks. But, at that time, I was hoping it would be forever. And I went to his house. We met up with a group of friends, and I brought along this bottle of alcohol-free wine. And it's just on the table. And my friend came in, he picked it up and said, "What is it?" And that literally kind of just broke all my resolve. I thought, yeah, he's right. I would like the real stuff. And I started drinking again. So pressure is pressure. It's easy to let that pressure defeat you. It defeated me many times. But anything you want to quit, it gets easier. And eventually you get into a place where you're not subject to that pressure, and you don't give yourself that pressure. You don't have that desire to do whatever it is, the thing that you don't want to do anymore. Everything we do is habit, right? And if you're out of that habit, it's easy.
I'd like to comment on when those comments come from friends. Again, like if it can be easy to sometimes resent it.
Yeah.
When, as you said, it's probably not malicious. We tease each other about a lot of things, but I think what helped me was that if someone is a true friend, deep down, despite all the teasing, they do want the best for you.
Yeah.
But if you take it in a confrontational way and in front of other people try and have an argument, and no, I'm doing this, you're going to kind of get the wrong side out of them. Whereas I would just take my friend and just one-on-one, just go to the side and say, "Look, mate, this is something that I'm really trying to do for my health. And I hope you can understand that, of course, I used to enjoy drinking with you. It's nothing personal to you. At the moment, I've had some whatever." You don't have to, if it's a friend, you can kind of just tell them the reasons why this is the choice that I'm making at the moment, and we can still have a great time. And I really appreciate if you could support me in this. 9 times out of 10, they will end up understanding. I think England's getting better with that now. But even my hyung in Korea, it was his shock when I told him that I won't drink with him anymore. It was so difficult at the start. Yeah. And I just realized that speaking to him on my own and just saying, "Look, bro, if you could help me with this, because, my health was not so good," or whatever reason it is. And if someone is still not supportive, then maybe you need to think about, for me, my definition of a friend is just someone who wants the best for you.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was sort of running that through my mind. I don't think I've ever had to really have that serious conversation, but that sounds like really good advice, if you're talking about actual close friends, to say, this is important for me. Ultimately, friends do want the best for you. So yeah, if that's a helpful thing to do, have that serious conversation. And I think also we should be honest about alcohol. It is associated with good times. We've all got experiences of having a good time with alcohol, having good memories, fun times with friends. The thing I'd like to encourage people, if you're a person who wants to quit alcohol, and I'm not telling anyone they should quit alcohol if they don't want to, but if it's something you want to do, I'd like to encourage you. You still have good times without it. One experience I just remembered is I went on a stag do. A friend was getting married. We went to Brighton for the stag do. Just one of our party was a reformed alcoholic. He had serious alcohol problems, and he went through a program. And out of respect to him, we didn't have any alcohol. And we still did stupid, nutty things that guys do on a stag do. You really don't need alcohol to behave like an idiot. It's still possible without it. And you can have good times without alcohol. Definitely, 100%.
I think at the start is the hardest part for me, because in social situations, they call it the social lubricant for a reason, right? If you are a bit shy, or even if you're not, I've never really defined myself as a shy person, but I know that I would be even less shy. And I would just have no concept of, should I speak to that person? I would just do it. However, that became a kind of crutch that I would almost call it a dependency at some point of, okay, I know I'm capable of speaking to that person, but after this, whatever drink it is, it will be a lot easier. So breaking that habit for me was probably the hardest part. Whereas now the new habit is talking to people and having nice moments without the drink. In my mind, sometimes it's like, oh, I've had a coffee now. It's a mental thing. Or, oh, I've had the non-alcoholic beverage, but I've got the drink in my hand now. Clemente laughs because I've called myself like Mr. Placebo. Because when he met me, it was a similar time around like you introducing me to Beck's Blue. Yeah. And I said, Clem, I'm not sure if this is 0%. I feel something. I feel like, why do I feel so like, drunk? But it's the energy around people together, friends, laughing and joking. That is a really powerful energy that we think is the alcohol. But actually, if you're alone and you just drink, you don't feel that energy. It's the human kind of connection, I think, that really is powerful, that we've unnecessarily associated solely to alcohol.
But then just to go back to you mentioning, being able to like be more social when people drink, I think that's also wrong because, for people who are very introverted, maybe they're going to hide behind that. They're gonna just rely on that instead of like trying to improve their social skills. So if they're in a context where they can't have access to like a little drink, it might be very challenging for them. So it kind of stops you from improving those areas of your life. For me, I'm quite introverted. Any social context is like a challenge to get better. If I would be drinking, it would be kind of the cheat code of, okay, I don't need to improve myself. I can just have that like kind of magic potion and that's it. I'm going to make it happen. You know what I mean? And I'm laughing, but to be honest, I think that it's terrible because there are a lot of, especially in our day and age, like there are a lot of people who struggle with social situations because of the screens and all of these things. If we always rely on these kind of things like alcohol to be able to talk to people, it's not good. So being able to improve yourself is very important. It doesn't matter how old you are, but if you're using these as like a gateway to not have to go through the improvement, it's quite negative, I think.
It's a common misconception as well, is that like people would say, I'm way more sociable, but I at one point would have classified myself as, I'm so smooth when I was drunk. But the reality is, like, I wasn't, because again, being sober, I can use my brain, I can be more calculated. Yeah. So I know that actually it would be stupid to say that. The synapses in my brain are doing the right thing by telling me that comment is not appropriate for that situation. And I'm more relaxed and calm. Of course, as I said, you have to go through that initial phase of getting used to it again. But yeah, you when you see people and they're swaying back and forth and they can't walk in a straight line, I wouldn't classify that as confidence or attractive. Yeah. But when you're in it, I guess you become biased, kind of cognitive dissonance, as they say. But it was hard to break out of, because anything that's a habit, whether it's having your coffee in the morning or your beer in the pub. Again, I'm lucky I had some friends who pointed out, like, do you think you're just drinking a little bit too much? And when I heard that at the start, I was like, what? Nah, of course not. It's just a culture. But then when I actually thought about it and just objectively looked, oh, wow. Yeah, in a month, 4 nights out. Hangovers would sometimes last like 2 days. I kind of did the math and I was like, wow, so there's going to be potentially 50 plus days of my year that are just written off, where I can't do something positive, can't teach languages as well, don't want to go to the gym. Do the math of that. In 10 years, that's 500 days. And when that's what actually really was the catalyst to stop for me, was Clemente and I went to a wine tasting event in October 2022. And I woke up afterwards just feeling terrible. And I thought, in 5 years, if I keep this habit, am I going to be looking the way I'd like to look? Am I going to be mentally as strong? How's my health going to be? And it was only after I visualized like 2 versions of me, the one who didn't carry on drinking and the one who did. Only then could I realize, like, wow, this isn't just a bit of banter on the weekend with the lads. This is something I actually could really just completely change the future of my life. So that's what hit me. But yeah, Andrew, have you got any more nuggets of wisdom to share with us?
Well, I think you dropped a huge nugget of wisdom there. I think that's incredible foresight for a young person to look decades down the line, what will my life be like? I think you're in a very small minority of young people who do that. And I would never have classed myself as one of those. And now I'm an old geezer. When you get older, you do appreciate your health more, or you think a lot more about health as you get older because it's deteriorating rapidly sometimes. And to think of yourself, your future self, decades ahead is such a wise thing to do. I never did it. But if you can do that when you're young, think about what is the quality of your life going to be. And again, I'm not arguing for quitting alcohol. Maybe for you guys and girls out there, maybe reducing alcohol is more realistic. But think about your health. Really think about your health. Your future self would definitely thank you for developing healthy habits. You'll probably have a longer life. Not just longer, but you'll have, people talk about now about health span, not just lifespan. Not just living longer, but having better quality, more energy when you get older. It's a great gift you can give to your future self, whether you do that through quitting or reducing alcohol. It's a brilliant way to think, Hakeem, and full marks for thinking like that.
감사합니다. Well, even just that, I remember Clemente, we had a moment a few years ago where I said, it's in the afternoon, we're in London. It's like, what do you want to do? And I said, do you want to go and get green tea or something? And he laughed because, could you explain in that moment? Because for me, that was an innocent, Brits, we love tea, but you found that quite funny, didn't you, at the time?
I can't remember now because it's just so normal.
I've converted him.
When was that?
That was a few years ago. Basically, what you were saying was just like, I don't think in growing up in Europe, it was always going for a drink. Let's go for a drink.
Yeah.
But because I said let's go for a tea, that took you by surprise.
But was that in London? I think it was wasn't it in Bangkok?
It was somewhere. Yeah, it was when we were traveling, maybe. Yeah.
But we were both not drinking at the time. Yeah, because I feel like. It was funny that we said that to each other, but in a good way, in a way of, wow, like it felt like we're improving. We're doing something good. So because if it was okay, let's go for a beer, it would feel. I was thinking it's like kind of taking a step back, for our health and all of that. But now we are doing things that are actually, it's just a detail. It's just having a tea, but it feels nice because. First of all, we're together having a good time and great conversation, but also we are consuming something that's potentially good for our health. So it's like a win-win situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's not something that I grew up with, having in mind. When you're with your friend, it's the afternoon or evening. It's like almost like automatic that we're going to go for a drink, not for a green tea. But in a way, I think that this should change. It would be nice if it changes. I understand that it's part of our culture. Alcohol is part of our culture. But then why do we have to look at people who don't drink or who just want to enjoy a green tea in a funny way? Oh wow, it's incredible. You want to take care of yourself. That's the thing that I struggle with to understand why. We are sometimes surprised with these things, which it would be better if that's the norm, the standard, that we all want to take care of ourselves. But right now, I think we've reached a point where we glorify, in a way, destroying our health. It's a strong word, but that's the case sometimes, we put it up there like, okay, as we mentioned, how many beers can you drink and things like that. So I think it would be better if it was the other way around,
Yeah, when I was a kid, there's a great comedian on TV, Dave Allen, great comedian. He used to just sort of sit on a stall and just talk about things in life. And one thing he spoke about once was the way people talk about alcohol. And he said, imagine if people talked about that about tea. And he's saying like, I had so many teas the other night. And he's saying, like, if you're sharing tea, go on, get that down you. It'd be crazy, right?
One shot.
Yeah. So, But I'm glad you mentioned tea, because one thing about alcohol, which I think is undeniable, is that in some contexts, it's a luxury. You know, really good whiskey is a luxury. It's a beautiful product that people have spent time and talent making. And these drinks, you know, are undeniably enjoyable. And since quitting alcohol, I used to love whiskies, by the way. And since quitting alcohol, my luxury item is tea. And of course, you can have, you know, bog standard black tea from the supermarket, but there's a whole world of teas, of oolongs, pu'ers, green teas, you know, from lots of different countries. There's a whole universe of flavor and experience out there, which for me has been a good substitute. When I want to celebrate, you know, if it's my birthday, I'll go out and buy a pretty expensive oolong tea, really enjoy it, really savor it. And that's my luxury. It's my whiskey now. So I think there's a lot to be said for tea, especially. And of course, coffee's speciality is a big thing now. But I think for me, especially tea, that's a big part of my life now. And I get that whiskies and gins are great drinks, you know, they're great flavors. And I remember it with fondness. I just don't want to have it. It's like, I know those things delicious. I don't have it anymore.
Recently, last year in Korea, after I stopped drinking, I would sometimes walk past people together, and I had fond memories with my young and all their friends together. And it was fun. Like, you know, I don't regret those times. It's just not wanting to do it anymore. And for some people, it might sound like, again, as Clem said, when we say we have this kind of appreciation for tea, the difference is, though, is that when you take the funny side away from it because it's different to the status quo culture in England, every tea that you get, your luxury there is actually beneficial for your health. In most cases, like whether it's oolong, ginseng, or pu'er, all the ones you mentioned, if you just look up the benefits of those, it's a double win because you're enjoying it, but you're also improving your health rather than, as Clem said, taking that step back. And then I'm a big believer in the compound effect of over the time of consuming those healthy beverages and enjoying it. You just got a compound of enjoyable moments, probably still cheaper than a lot of the really expensive wines and spirits out there. And inside, it's going to, as you said, it's going to be thanking you as well.
Yeah. Well, actually, I just want to follow on from what you said about it being expensive, because it's very easy to look at a specialty tea or specialty coffee. Wow, that costs a lot. You know, that tiny little bag for 20 quid. No way. But I would argue that probably even the most expensive rare tea is probably better value than a bottle of wine or a bottle of spirits, because with a little packet of tea, you're going to get lots of cups of tea. Each serving of tea, a good quality tea, you get many infusions. You know, some of these oolong teas, you can get about 10 infusions, something ridiculous. So I think tea is a very good value drink. When I got in touch with Hakeem Hakeem got in touch with me, rather, after quite a long time, since we worked together, he said, "You introduced me to Beck's Blue." And I thought, I introduced him to that? Really? So I felt like I should apologize. Really, I'm sorry about that. But when you're quitting, these things are good. I equate them to like training wheels when you're a kid. And you have these little wheels, you know, on your bike so you can stabilize yourself. They're called stabilizers, right? Those things are like the training wheels. Like if you want to quit, then having something that looks and tastes like beer might be helpful for you. But eventually there comes a time where you don't need it. I don't go for alcohol-free wine, alcohol-free beer at home because I just don't need it. But I think if that's helpful for you, it's good.
At the time, it was revolutionary for me before in London. Nowadays, I'm not so, I guess, tempted even for the non-alcoholic beers, but for different reasons of that. I mean, Jack helped me with that. Is just check the labels. And if there are a bunch of chemicals in whatever I'm putting into my body that I don't know, I should probably not approach with more caution. And even the teas as well.
Yeah,
I love matcha. But if you go into most cafes and ask for something with matcha, it's going to be a super sugary matcha latte.
Yeah, I think moderation in general, not only when it comes to alcohol, is very important, for life, for health. So because when you said that, in France and Spain or continental Europe, we have like different ways of drinking. I always think because for us it's quite normal to have a glass of wine at lunch, a glass of wine at dinner. But if that's every day, is that moderation? Isn't that too much too? In my opinion, that's not moderation. Having a glass of wine every now and then, it's maybe okay. But when it's a habit and it's every day, I know some people who would say, a lunch without a glass of wine is not a lunch, But that just it means that they're dependent.
So speaking of Andrews, the podcast from Andrew Huberman a few years ago, it was, I think, over 2 hours long. He did a full breakdown of like the scientific research on how alcohol affects you. That was another key, catalyst that really made me think. But there was a part about how genetics affects your relationship with alcohol and how you can kind of inherit traits of maybe like Clem and I were very different drinkers. I would want to drink and keep drinking throughout the night, whereas Clem would be a lot more, moderation was a lot, I guess, within his nature. But then understanding that it is layered and that someone might be very comfortable having that glass of wine and it won't really affect their lives much. But then a sibling or their friend or anyone else, that moderation, even biologically speaking, could be far more challenging and detrimental to them just based on genetic characteristics they may have inherited from other people. And I know that my father doesn't drink, and he said that the last time he drank, he was a teenager and realized he couldn't stop after a really bad Christmas, probably Boxing Day hangover. And since then, he said he just stopped. And I kind of was fighting against my DNA because it was very similar when I started to drink, is that, it just kept going through the night, the spike. Yeah, and you observe people and it was complete opposite with Clem. So that was extremely surprising to me that even though his relationship was so different with alcohol, he still said that he benefited from it. He still benefited from abstaining from it. Let's make sure we're clear on that.
I think the great thing about being sober is that you're more straight with people. When you say to somebody you like them, you appreciate them, it's coming more from the heart rather than a place of trying to toy with them, manipulate them. So I think that's from my point of view, being sober, it improves your relationships because you're more honest. You're not just playing games with people, and which is so easy to do when your personality is distorted by too much alcohol.
I haven't met that many sober people who've gone up to a stranger and told them, "I love you, mate."
Well, I love you, mate. It's the first time.
So really grateful, Andrew, for your time and your insights today. And hopefully those watching, if you have taken any value from this, we'd really appreciate you subscribing and letting us know what you think in the comments as well, where you're viewing from. Are the alcohol cultures different where you're from? Let us know what you think, and we'll see you very soon.